Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our chat tonight. This is part 6 of our series on Liechtenauer Zettel, focusing specifically on the Scheitelhau tonight. How's everyone doing? Everyone's okay?
Great so far.
Well,
excellent, excellent. I know we're down a few people tonight because I did not plan that well ahead, and it is Father's Day. I don't know if that's international at all. But at least in the U.S., it's Father's Day, so a lot of our students are either off with their fathers or off with their children. So we have a smaller class tonight, but I think we should still have a good time. Like I said, tonight we are starting off with the Scheitelhau, and I'm going to start off with, as our usual, reading Liechtenauer's original verse with this, and then we will look at the commentaries by Peter von Danzig. So the text begins, the scalp cut. The scalper is a danger to the face, with its turn, very dangerous to the breast. Whatever comes from him, the crown will take away. Slice through the crown, thus you will break it hard through. Press the strokes with slice, pull them away. So that's what the original text says. What do we derive from that? What do we see that kind of stands out to us? Luke?
Oh, you have to call on me?
Yes.
But why? Yeah, I passed.
Tell me about the scalper, Luke.
The scalper, I usually see it as a counter to the guard Alber. As a thrown from Vontag, goes up to the high Vontag and rocks over the guard Krung, which would be the logical guard against a high attack from someone who is an Alber.
And for someone that doesn't know, Luke, what does Krung look like? Well, because you're standing there with a sword.
Krung would be the high guard. It's more of a transitional guard, but you want to go up into Krung to block that. It's kind of a oh no guard, I guess would be the way to say that.
Mm-hmm.
So you go up, raise your hands above your head to try and get your cross and your blade above your head. And with the Scheitel, you'd be able to rock over that guard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's actually the what you were saying right there, that you can rock over the guard. That is in the very beginning of this text, the scalp is a danger to the face, with its turn dangerous to the breast. That is just that part. I have some video that we can look at later, once again, of me getting to hit Sarah, which is always fun. But well, the idea that we come up high, we get that hard parry where they're deflecting high into Krung, and then with that turn or winding type action, we can come underneath and threaten the chest rather than the face.
I must add something to that. I seem to have a little bit different translation, though, because there's an additional part which is not there in the translation of yours. I try to translate it as good as I can into the English. The scalp how breaks what a buffle hose or thrusts, who threatens to I don't know what's
I don't mean to, Kevin, interrupt you, but I think what it is you're looking at the one right before. You need to go one more verse down, that's why.
Yes, okay, then never mind.
Because you're at Schiller ein Pricht, was Puffel / oder Stich. Part of my German. My German is terrible, I know.
I don't mind. It's so terrible that I don't understand you. I'll let you know.
So we're at the the following verse. Der Scheitelhau, der Scheitler, dem ans Lucht an Lutz ist Gewahr mit seiner Kar, der prüft was Gefer, was von ihm kommt,
Hübt.
die Krong,
That's Middle High
das,
German.
yeah, oh yeah.
Der Scheitler ist im Antrittsgefahr. Mit seiner K, der Pust war fast Gefahr. Was ihn kümmt, die Kron das abnimmt, schneid durch die Kron, so brichst du sie hart schon, der Stiche Druck, mit dem Schnitten sie abzuck.
Yes. That sounds much nicer than when I do it. Thank
Actual German.
you.
Well, what a coincidence.
I took 2 semesters of German in college, so that's as far as I got with it.
Sorry.
Well, I
do the best I
I
can.
do study things and might never need anymore, and mathematics that's far too complicated and useless.
Yeah, all useless skills nowadays, right? Yeah. But yeah, that's the that bit you just read. That's the section we're on tonight. That's why that's what was throwing you off earlier. So I wanted to go over one other section on here because I thought we'd roll this together before as part of this class. But the following 2 sections, which are relatively short, I think are kind of a good wrap up to the end of the secret or master cuts that the scalp cut is the 5th, the final of, which is in the text here, the 4 guards. 4 guards alone hold and disdain the common. Ox, plow, fool, from the roof should not be unknown to you. And then followed by 4 oppositions. 4 are the oppositions that hurt the 4 guards very much. Beware of parrying. If it happens to you, it troubles you greatly. If you are parried, and when that has happened, hear what I advise to you. Tear away and strike quickly with surprise. Set upon the 4 ends. Stay upon them. Learn if you want to bring it to an end. So the end of this is, so I should say, the scalp cut is going over the last of the 5 basic Meisterhau or secret strokes, master cuts. The 4 guards and 4 oppositions are referring to the fact that each one of 4 of those 5 master cuts deliberately counter the different one of the different guards. So I know we've talked about them in these videos as we've gone along, and I think even for tonight, Luke has already mentioned that the fact that in the text we get the fact that the Scheitelhau, the scalp cutter here, breaks or defeats the guard Alber. In this case, we'll go into a little more in depth as we get into some of the text here, but as a preview, it's simply that Alber, the fool's guard with the hands low, leaves that spot vulnerable up high. So he has the top of his head vulnerable, and that's where we want to strike. An interesting thing that I've kind of looked at a lot of this text, and I think I've alluded to it or mentioned to it in some of the other videos, the beginning of the actual verse from Liechtenauer, the main poem that makes up this text, the very beginning is sort of generic teachings of longsword, how to hold the sword, stepping behind the sword, stepping with the sword, some of the really fundamental things. Then we have these sections where it focuses on the different cuts, the Zornhau, the Zwerchhau, the Krumpau, the Scheitelhau, the Scheitelhau. And these are all actions that are done to close distance. These are the plays that start when you are just approaching range on your opponent, and each one is sort of optimized to enter into fighting distance safe and controlled with an opponent. The end of the text, which is what we're going to be looking at over the next couple weeks, goes into several different plays like the Nachreisen, the Überlaufen, Absetzen, Zucken, Durchlaufen, Abschneiden, Hendrunken, all the different stuff that is the actions done once you have entered in. So you've approached the fight, you've entered in using your master cut to get the most advantage coming into range against your opponent, making them react to your cut in the way that you are in control of the scenario. And then the text ends with a section going over, here's all the different things to do now that you've entered into that range. So I really enjoy the kind of basic organizational curriculum that is kind of planned out here, that it's the entering into the fight, closing distance, and now what to do once you have closed distance.
Wrestle.
Well, there's that. But we're not all Italians here, so we don't wrestle everything.
Oh, I'm Italian.
I mean, you do the cross training. Okay, so how about if we go in and look at specifically some of the comments here from the Von Danzig Fashion book. Oh, everyone good? Any comments that we want to say about that before we move on?
I'm kind of curious. There's a certain passage in the first verse, what was it? That the Excuse me, it's kind of confusing to switch between the English and the German. And,
oh, I understand.
With his turn, very dangerous to the breast. The thing is, what I could imagine, if you are contacting with the crown, so you're coming in like this from above somehow. Wait, I just go down. And you are engaged with the crown up here. You might turn this way, so go down to the breast. I'm not sure if that's a proper interpretation. So for example, if you go this way and you notice you get parried, well, that there's some way you can turn this Scheitelhau into something to threaten the breast itself. And that's something that's in there which makes me curious. Any ideas?
You know, I just because you're asking about it now, I think some of this is going to get repeated when we look at the commentaries. But I actually, because you're mentioning it now, I thought I will share this. So here is just, I mean, this is not the greatest quality like usual. I just kind of shot this really quick earlier in the day. It was nice and sunny out, so everything is a little overexposed. But so first here I have video of just the Scheitelhau attacking against the ox. So, I mean, against the Alber. So there it is with the hands high. One thing to try to do with this, Kevin in particular, is use the true edge. It looked like when you were doing it, you were coming over with the short edge. You were actually rotating your hand over. So try to get the hand soft in the wrist so that that forward edge is what is making initial contact. Yes, yeah. So there's that, and I think I should have it here in slow motion. Boom. There's the regular and slow. Now, this is the next part here. If I edited this correctly, we'll find out in just a moment. Will be the with the turn danger to the breast. So here, defend with Krong, and then there's the turn. So let's watch that in slow motion. So here I come in, against her Alber with my Scheitelhau, and she rises up very quickly to defend using the crown, the Krung parry here. As soon as I'm there, I now rotate, pushing my left hand up nice and high, and that rotation gives me that line down. Depending on how high my opponent's crown is, that could go to the breast or could go to the face here. If you look at the alignment there, we're both fairly tall people, so that makes that's a factor to it as well. But if I continue to press that attack there, right now I'm lined up just with the bottom of her chin, but with a little push more on my hand here, I could target down a little lower. So, linear drawing. What that text is talking about, in my opinion, is this concept here of entering with the Scheitelhau, waiting till they respond with Krung, and then turning. And you see how much angle is now. When I've wound with my hands that way, I have a little more angle on the sword, which I think is where he's talking about danger to the breast.
Yeah, if you did a duplieren, a doubling, no, not duplieren. I'm sorry. You leave the bind and come back the bind underneath, rewind underneath. If the crown was higher,
through.
Yeah,
Zettel?
Where the crown was higher, I think you'd be threatening the breast more. But yes, I feel like that shows exactly it. You did the crown and they were high, wind around and come underneath.
Well, I will say that, Luke, you are also right, because that is, again, I normally wait to show videos when we get into the later parts of the work because of this, but that is the follow-on.
That looks more like upsets them to me instead of winding, honestly.
Okay.
Because you lose the connection, right?
Yeah. I would disengage, so I would absolutely connection.
That's durchwechseln. That's upsetting then. So you lose the connection and attack elsewhere. But if you consider your enemy having the crown up, he might as well just hew your arms in the moment you just lose the connection. Because in the text, Liechtenauer also mentions if you already powerful broken the crown, so you having a strong bind. If you lose that strong bind, you endanger more or less your good control you have upon your enemy.
Oh yeah. Any action that involves leaving the bind always will leave you open, and part of that is the risk of feeling out where your opponent's energy is going. If they are using the crown and they've simply stopped moving and are standing stalwart, strong, then disengaging entirely is dangerous. They're ready for a follow-on. At the same time, if Luke throws that Scheitel and against, say, me, where I've come up and
what
as
like,
I'm rising up,
taller than me?
yeah. Well, there's some distance, the fact that I'm a foot taller than you changes up some of our fighting. But if I've come up here and I've stopped his sword, then the idea of him just disengaging is a little more dangerous. But if he hits that indes, that during phase, where as I'm coming up, maybe I'm going to come up and parry aside and go for a pommel strike, or some of the follow-ons go for a hook and a strike, whatever I'm doing. If he gets me while my action is still occurring, that's when he has a little more opportunity to counter me. The disengaging and changing through underneath isn't the best option if I've simply blocked and I'm standing here. Because then I'm just going to snap over or come underneath, whatever, if I'm simply waiting here. But if he gets me while I'm doing something else, that's when he has the opportunity to try to get that strike in.
Crown is also pretty vulnerable to a grip underneath, so you can just run through.
Yes, that is a fun counter to it. Yeah, yeah. Krung is one of those positions that I avoid very frequently. I try not to be there, but if I am there, I know I like to come up once I've gotten that. As soon as there's contact and I didn't take a sword to the brain, as soon as I feel that, I'm going to turn that into either a hanging and close into grapple, just shoot in this way, just use this to enter so I have that nice cover here, and then move in, or either grapple or pommel strike.
The way I saw the crown made is all mostly in a way that looks like this.
Yeah.
Are you crouching?
Because you are angling your arms, and I would stretch them. If you stretch them, you have a way better way to catch the blade on a flat angle.
Oh, yeah. I'm kind of stretching out here. It's just that I only have so much distance.
Never mind. No problem.
I know. I see what you're saying. I'm trying to. I do my best to not smash my phone.
Also in
with
your
my
video,
little...
that was a little bit confusing. And also to the German word, it's Krone oder Kron, not Kron. It's a little bit confusing. So if you're talking about the Krone or the
Krone?
Well, that's the German, but it's never mind. As long as you all know what it's meant, it's all right.
I only speak the one language. I'm sorry. I'm trying my best.
It's all right.
Think of
just to mention, if there's always room for improvement for everyone.
Oh yes.
I like the interpretation of the turn you made. It's great.
I'm trying to remember what I think it's just in the old German, it's just Kron is how it was spelled, and some of in the early text.
Right durch die Kron. Well.
Kron.
Well, it's a little bit a poetic way. You sometimes in German use some changes on the end of a word to make it adding up to the verse and something like that. So, and in the Middle High German, it's also the problem you have differing pronunciations, even varieties of a word, singularity, if you just go to the next city. So you cannot pin that on that. So you might, but you cannot. If you want to, that's okay, and I don't have a problem with that. Even the actual German dictionary, the Duden, is just a picture of the actual commonly spoken German language. So if that changes, it will also apply to the Duden. So if several thousand Germans start saying instead of Krone, Kron, that would be exactly that. Then it would become a German word.
There's also just interesting linguistic things looking at the old text, because I was talking to a friend of a friend that actually studied medieval manuscripts, not fight books, not anything. She specialized in Bibles and comparing old Bibles from 13th through 17th centuries and all this. And one of the things that was always kind of interesting was that the idea that spelling things a certain way is so normal for us now. Like this is it, we spell a word and this is how we spell it and this is how it's in the written language. When everything was done manuscript and everything was just written by hand, there wasn't that there wasn't a concept of a normalized spelling for things, and that really started to that developed linguistically as the printing press became more standardized, and which is also why even in like I mean the printing press changed some of the languages. Why in English we see U's added into things, COLOUR, color. And in English or American English, we dropped a lot of those because Americans are notoriously cheap and we don't want to spend extra money in ink when we don't have to. So we dropped as many extra letters out of words that the British had thrown in there just because. But yeah, there's some context. But the I know in some of the texts within the same manuscript, dagon will be written with a D or a T, and it just switches back and forth sort of randomly, because when that manuscript was copied by hand by some scribe, it didn't matter. There wasn't that spell check feature going on, so they could kind of write it however they wanted. And there's also, I remember seeing some reference that I don't know if the Germans were the same way, but English poets around like the Renaissance, late Renaissance, would intentionally try to spell words. If they use the same word 3 times in a paragraph, they would try to spell it different ways every time, with the intent of showing how good they were at writing, because spelling wasn't standard. So if they could figure out a way to get the same word written by using an F versus a PH versus a, it was a way to show that their intelligence and their mastery of the language by showing the variety that they could put in there, like a painter using different strokes on a different painting for different textures. I like to go on tangents sometimes, by the way.
The German language, I can well, at least say that it was standardized by Duden and Grimm. There was, don't pin me on that. It was about the 17th century, where this all started, more or less. And Duden just started this, a dictionary by writing the words his pupils spoke. He was a teacher, and started by that making a dictionary. The Grimms, on the other hand, they were known for the gathering of all those ancient fairy tales and such, and they started with the thinking that the original German language was the High German, because of the high cultural essence which was embedded in the language. And they were trying to force the Middle High German way of writing upon the modern German words. And you had some crazy ass variations just for level or something, for just a spoon. And the whole thing just turned out for the favors of Konrad Duden, just because he used the Prussian writing rules, and they were applied for more of the Germans. So therefore his book became, or his way of dictionary became, more public, even though Bismarck to his time favored the Grimm variation. And even before the Grimm and Konrad Duden, there was another dictionary which was even older but never updated. And the difficult part was all the 3 dictionaries were competing against each other. And just because Konrad Duden just applied it to more of the Germans, it became more public and therefore beaten all the others. And that's why the modern German is like that. And the modern German actually applies to the originally rules of writing to Martin Luther, of his Bible.
yeah, that was one of the standardized one of the that kind of set the precedent, right? The history parts of some of this is always fascinating to me, because I think one of the things that a lot of people tend to look at some of this text, and they look at it in a closed window of just we're looking at this, manuscript 44A8, the von Danzig manuscript, or whatever you want to call it, and we're looking at it as its own thing, but nothing is its own thing. It's influenced by the time it was written in. It was influenced by the people it was written for. It was influenced by the people it was written by. And things like, a major technological move like the invention of the printing press changed the way that our fight books worked, because you have all the earlier texts were written by hand. But then by the end of the system, like the manuscript, Kevin, you showed earlier with Paulus Hector Meyer, there's Paulus Hector Meyer, there's also Joachim Meyer, another master, and they actually had their works done in print, not just one-off manuscript. There's also kind of one of the neat things that we have multiple copies of those books now and things like that. But yeah, history is never in a sealed bubble. Everything is always influenced by 1,000 other factors around it. And sometimes looking at, like you're saying, some of this, the fighting amongst different German dictionaries hundreds of years ago leads to, changes the way that, maybe we might be able to find different texts from the 14th century, from the 16th century, that have different spellings based on what was going on and with the battles with these dictionaries that were being written at the time as well. So it's fun to do the sword stuff, but it's also interesting sometimes to look at, some of the history behind some of these things, and the back deal arrangements and the different things that were going on around it, so we understand not just what they were doing, but why they were and how they were, and the thought process behind some of their things.
And if you just add up to the thoughts Liechtenauer put at the beginning of his writing, those writings were always considered for already known fighters. There were no basics, and it were all in shrouded words, because it was not meant for the common folksman to be known to the fencing. And also, what I've commonly heard around some clubs here in Germany, those manuscripts were meant as advertisement for the corresponding masters, because they just published them in order to show, hey, look what cool stuff I can do and teach you, and this is only a glimpse of the stuff I know. And this is also one of the reasons much knowledge gets lost even today. If you look at the industry and the all the patents, most patents are not even published or even get to known, because they don't want anyone to copy them in any way. Because if you make a patent, you need to, have a description how it works, and not everyone wants to.
They don't want to share that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Though I'm very appreciative that some of the masters, like Sigmund Ringek and von Danzig, this manuscript, if all the later masters had followed along with what Liechtenauer had intended with keeping everything quiet and secret, we would not be able to rediscover this stuff like we do. So having the other masters that say, this is exactly what he means, step with your right foot and swing the sword this way, and I'm glad some of those, he might be rolling in his grave thinking about all the writing that was done like that, but it worked out well for us.
Hopefully.
I feel like we have a decent understanding. I mean, I'm not going to say that.
I'm thankful for Kevin and his better understanding of German.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely an interesting perspective to add to this too.
Yeah, because I speak
glad
one
of
language,
contributing.
unfortunately. So I'm always happy to just hear native speakers' takes on what I'm trying to pronounce.
Yeah, I feel bad. I'm in a weird spot where I've looked at these manuscripts enough and I've studied just enough German that contextually I can pick up some of the transcriptions, and I can sort of, maybe not word for word, I can sort of get a understanding of what the text is. I work from mostly the English translations from Christian Tobler. Christian is one of the leading English translators of the German text, and he actually works with Dirk Hagedorn pretty regularly. They've been corresponding together for 20-something years now, and I get to train with him. So a lot of times, it's a blessing and a curse, because I can, if I'm having trouble with something, I can just turn to Christian and say, "Hey, what does this say?" And then he just can read it and tell me. But it means that I have that crutch. I don't have to teach myself High Middle German to be able to work with this stuff. I can just send him an email or a text message and just say, I'm stuck. What does this say? Oh, here it is. Okay. And it's easier for me.
That's a
I'm
big
very appreciative of
downside. In Germany here, I discovered many clubs which work that way. So you have, I say, one guy who is the main interpreter of the actual manuscripts they use, and they, in part, maybe actually phonetically favor some specific manuscripts and try to exactly reproduce those techniques. And you have mostly one guy who can actually perform that properly, and the rest just trains with them without actual knowledge about the manuscript. And that's the interesting part you have here in Germany. You have so many ways of interpreting a certain verse or a certain part that there is, even with the word lager in the text here, there is a little bit of a struggle, because a lager is commonly used for the same part as a hood, and the problem is, so where's the difference? And no one even knows for sure. So you must assume on the word lager, so that means laying or legen. You lay something in preparation. So maybe that. So you use the more passive hood you already have more aggressively. Maybe not. Maybe.
It's interesting the way you're saying that too, just in terms of just with your own natural language, you have a different perspective on some of these, and it's actually a very valuable thing to look at this from both perspectives, because I look at this as a term just from this book. It doesn't have the connotations of using this, learning it as a language from birth and things like that. So it's different perspectives. So it's sort of like comparable to, as an instructor, I sometimes work with students like Luke here, that had never done martial arts before. He had no martial experience. He came to me as a completely blank slate, and basically whatever I tell him just kind of goes. He just did it naturally, because this is what I told him what it was. I have other students like Rob, who wasn't able to be here tonight, who has as much of a background in martial arts as I do, but from different stuff. So when he comes at it, he has that influence of, well, this is how I'm used to moving. This is how I'm used to holding a sword. This is how I'm used to holding a dagger or a knife or something. And, it just changes up the perspective. So Kevin, you have, these are the words that I'm used to as part of my native language. This is what this is a part of you. And then I come into this looking at these texts, and it's something that I'm being taught later in life. So we end up in the same general place, but we come at it with drastically different perspectives. I mean, I personally just find it fascinating.
I see you envy my my mother tongue, and you don't have to, because the problem on Middle High German is it is well related to the High German we speak today, but you lose many words, and there are many different usages of those words. Even I have a very big dictionary for Middle High German. I found I might just search a link on the fly and post it in the chat, which even shows there are certain words or certain corresponding phrases in words we use today, which are barely unknown why or what they mean. And so there are many words for me too, which I have no clue about what they mean, because they simply get lost. And that's language. It evolves, and that's a problem.
May I interject? What I'm
Sure, I guess.
it's basically, hush you. Coming from a linguistics standpoint, this is akin to people who are speaking English reading Chaucer. So this is roughly the same, I believe. If I'm wrong, Kevin, please correct me. But it's essentially,
or even Shakespeare.
Or Shakespeare. There are words that we don't understand. They're still in our native tongue. They're still in English. However, some of the expressions are outdated, not used, spelled wrong. Am I wrong, Kevin? Or
That's exactly the thing. If I would read Shakespeare, I would be completely lost.
Watch the movie.
Don't feel bad, because we read Shakespeare in high school and middle school, and we're lost for a while.
No,
we have to study it, and it's our native language.
Some of them read Shakespeare and are lost. Some of us actually understand it.
I was Bottom the Weaver. I was lost. I was
yeah, but I'm the linguistic. I love linguistics. So English.
So you'd be less lost than me, but I was so lost in high school.
I read Moby Dick in 8th grade, and I believe I was at Romeo and Juliet around 7th or 8th grade. Shut up, I liked it. And it's a total chicken. It's like basically, shut up, no, it's basically a rom-com for, anyway. Just shut up.
I didn't say anything. I kind of laughed.
But, yeah, so I understand what you're saying.
We don't quite get.
It sort of makes me feel better that this is a universal experience. It's not just us. It's everybody trying to read old texts from their own language.
Well, it's like, have you ever tried to read Chaucer's stuff, like Old English? It's not easy.
Yeah.
Especially since they didn't develop the space yet. So every word was kind of written into the next word. So it was kind of difficult.
Guys, I gotta run for a minute.
Yeah.
To the old fatherly phone call.
Gotcha.
Chaucer was influenced by a lot of French and Germanic language because it was Old English. So a lot of I took a bunch of classes in college because I also took German in college. My grandfather was born in Germany and moved here in 1930 something, and he stopped speaking the language, and so I didn't get a lot of it. But it's interesting how, Kevin, you will say something and I can hear the certain, because I remember barely, my grandfather died unfortunately when I was young, but I can hear the nuances of your of you saying a specific word, and then having Chris and Luke say the same thing, and theirs are not as nuanced, because it's said that because we're born hearing a certain language, there are nuances of said language that people who are not native speakers, who didn't hear early enough, they can't hear the nuances for example, if you were to learn Chinese, you can't hear some of the nuances and you can't form the sounds that they hear.
I have said the same thing about swordsmanship because it's lost also in translation and also in there's a sea apart from Europe and America.
A mere pond.
I'm just saying it's a reason why I think it's a sort of accident between Fiore and Liechtenauer stuff because Fiore studied with everybody who already has text, and we're Liechtenauer. We've studied with the German art. It's I think they're more similar than they are not, but that's just me.
Oh yeah.
The interesting part is you have a predominant language corresponding to the bureaucracy there. And if you were looking to certain parts of formerly German-controlled regions, you have a vast majority, or minority, let's say that way. It's so a predominant minority, which is, for example, speaking German, French, English, English. The British Empire was big enough, this predominant, and you have Belgium or Netherlands, all those who left their traces through the bureaucracy. I'm in the opinion, if the German Empire would have spread a little bit much, we may be having a little bit more of German-speaking people because of the bureaucracy. And adding up to the thing lost in translation, the sword fighting, we Europeans are as pragmatic as the Americans in another part. Technology we never use or don't need anymore, we simply forget. So with the upcoming of new fighting techniques, firearms or weapons, you simply say, what do we do with the old trash? Let's just forget it, and that's the problem. I'm a big fan of the saying, which is made by a let's player I was watching, and which I find very very hitting on most of the things happening today. History does not repeat itself; it rhymes. For example, Industrial Revolution in the medieval Germany. You have upcoming of mills, and people in the cities are rioting against those mills because they make those people obsolete. And in order, the mills are always placed outside of cities because they are not allowed to benefit from the city's protectioning walls. That goes with fencing it itself. So you forget it because it's obsolete. That goes for words in English. You lose some letters because they're obsolete.
There's a really interesting point about that, because as being taught American history, I did not learn that. But that is really interesting. Also, I'm at 2%, so I'm probably going to leave soon.
Go plug your phone in.
Yeah, that involves a extension cord out here.
Matt actually put in an outlet on the back deck for that reason. Or I think it was to keep the chickens warm in the winter, but
there is one, but again, that involves an extension cord.
I just use I have an external battery that I just plug my phone in so that I can move around for just that reason.
I'm not busy for my part. I have enough place in my room. Space. I butcher the English language as well, so sorry for that.
You don't actually.
Oh, we do a fine job of that ourselves. Don't worry.
We do. I mean, we butcher our own language.
Absolutely, every day.
Think about it.
Your English is much better than our German.
American English is a bastardized version of English.
Grammar's a lie.
Grammar is not a lie. As someone who is polylingual,
we speak American Sign, which is basically French. Grammar's a lie.
I'm a native speaking German. I somewhat learned any grammatics we have, and I forgot them on the fly. So grammatics are just enforced patterns upon a language which is evolving like a bacteria or a virus. So
Natural
it
growth.
may apply for a certain time, but it's getting, well, changing in certain ways, and there are common things. And I'm not a fan of linguistics because I have always bad marks in it, and maybe that's the reason why. And I had the unpleasant acquaintance with Goethe, so well, his work just embedded a more or less traumatic experience from a language for me.
Okay.
One more thing, in the part of the failure in the Liechtenauer's commentary to the Longsword, there's also a mention of the Scheitelhau being applied. There is a some techniques mentioned, and I don't know if you want to go them through, because they might be a little bit more detailed. I'm not sure, because
Oh no! I'm sorry. Bye, guys.
Bye.
No.
Oh, I'm guessing his phone just died.
Epilogue.
Oh, yeah, come on, Luke.
And now he's just frozen with that sour look on his face. On at least on my end here.
No,
See how long that stays.
Oh,
This is a sorry.
He looks so upset.
It's a sorry look.
Chris, could you like screenshot that and
Yeah, see if I can.
please?
Can I make him like? I don't know if it.
Hold on, I got it.
I didn't. Okay.
I'm wondering, why would you have a
Crap, I just
phone for such an occasion and not having a proper recharging opportunity?
Yeah, plug it in ahead of time. I think he just wasn't paying attention and forgot to plug it in before the class.
I guess he will join us soon because he's searching a cable right now in the moment. I take a bet on that.
Hopefully.
Christopher, for the future, I can gladly aid with my mother tongue in the regard of helping or aiding some of the interpretations. I must say, in addition, I'm not a martial arts specialist regarding HEMA, and I'm more or less a amateur, just teaching it himself, as I mentioned in the email. And I might just well, butcher it up for people watching this as a YouTube video. I'm sorry. I'm not advanced in the techniques. I am lacking of practice because I don't have the pleasure of a regular fencing partner, which I can perform all those techniques, though I taught all this myself to read them and understand them. And it's a huge advantage, but I sometimes get lost for ideas, just like the turn you made. It was just so simple, and I just thought myself, well, why were you wasting so much time on just thinking about a variety that would work out? Just turn it. Well, yeah, just turn it.
There's sometimes like that's not just you. Don't feel bad. That's there are plenty of times where we've looked at some manuscript we don't look at normally, and we spend an entire hour of class trying to figure out some complex move and then give up and then come back a week later and look at it again and say, oh, it was just this. Oh, okay, yeah, never mind. That was
one more thing, what just comes to mind to me, there is the use of parry in the English translation. I hate that because parry assumes something that is not present. In the German version, talking about Versetzen, it's maybe something you might find useful if you don't know it already. What it means really. For example,
Yeah, go ahead. What do you have more for like the term
So
versets itself?
if you just have something you put somewhere, and you put it somewhere else, you you might just call it versetzen. You sit it somewhere else, so it's just a other part where you sit it. So you sit it. So, and that's something you need to know if you are fencing. So, for example, versetzen is always corresponding with the tip of the blade, so the ord. So if you have the ord somewhere around here, and you want to put it somewhere else, you versetz it. So that's the whole thing, and I find it pretty blunt using parry for that, because parry is something static. This is parry, and versetzen is something like this.
You know, I'll say that it may be the linguistic choice of a given translator using the term parry versus versets simply because of the language of martial arts and fencing and basically standardized concepts. It might have been a slight oversight in that regard, but it might not have been the translator might have been doing that not with the intent of changing the meaning of the word like you're describing it, but it might have been just to make it so that a reader understands it as a sword, like a defensive sword action, because that's kind of the like the standard of, oh, what is a parry? If you're in the common fencer, not anybody that like, you know, somebody that just watched Star Wars and Conan the Barbarian and things will understand if I say, you know, parry with your sword, they mean like block. So it might have been a choice in that. And that's again where some of the things like this, like just like we're doing this dialogue, some of this discussion is informative in that we're looking at this not just from the perspective of there's the guy that wrote it, there's the guy that added the commentary, there's the guy that translated or that wrote down that commentary to make the transcription, and then there's the guy that added the comment, you know, essentially adds the commentary itself by translating it to another language. So we're looking at generation, and some subtle changes like that can have a fairly significant meaning shift over multiple iterations.
If you translate something, you have a reduction of information. With reduction of information comes a loss of information, and if you lose information that might be the crucial information, that's a pity. And that's just what I like to point out. What I found always fascinating about HEMA, and excuse me, what the funny thing was, as I started with that and getting known to HEMA, I was surprised that all around the world they used German phrases, and that was so. It was a bit nostalgic, if you want to say it that way. And I'd like to give it at your heart that you might just use that term in order to maybe use some more information out of this for some crucial thing, or maybe if it's just to point a little bit more out that you know a little bit more than the rest. Because I find it a bit more important to call it by the name. It's just like not for the mean of knowing what you're doing, just because of the mean of understanding. If you are reading German texts and you know what a Versatz is, you automatically know, that is meant by that. And this is something I learned throughout my experience with HEMA. The important part is not to know the language or the phrases or the words just for the cause of handling it. It's just for the cause of understanding or writing it like a melody. And if you know how to write down the melody, you can remember it, and teach it others, if you know how to sing the melody, you might just know how to sing it beautifully, but you don't know how to bring it to paper, and that's the thing. And I read through some other transcriptions. I might just in chat the Kriegsbuch of MAS B26 by Abe from Hartstein. That guy uses pretty much similar phrases, but adds up something made up by himself, and that complicates the whole thing.
Yeah.
And by the way, interesting note on that thing, Abe zum Hartstein is a fencer who also wrote some techniques for disappropriate combatations. For example, you're fighting someone in chainmail. And for example, that thing is, in German today, you say to chainmail usually Kettenhemd. So chain, skirt, Kettenhemd.
Okay.
And the interesting part is, back then they talked about a Ringpanzer, so a loop ring panzer, not tank, so armor, so a loop, so ring armor, and that's something more appropriate, which also got lost in the development of the language. So if you use, for example, in HEMA terms of a Kettenhemd, or you should know that it's meant that the original word is a Ringpanzer, for example.
That's really cool to know the actual.
Lucas, you're pretty quiet.
Well, I came back.
Come back.
Yeah, my phone ran out.
Welcome back.
I'm back on a different device.
Yeah, just if you don't mind, speak up if your girlfriend won't kill you for that. But
No,
you're just a little quieter.
Sorry, I'm on my laptop opposed to my phone.
Gotcha. The phone gets a much better picture. I'll say that.
Yeah, I believe it. It's went from light to dark outside, so.
That too.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so we've had definitely some fantastic discussion tonight, and before we'll continue on just one second, but I want to say that I was looking at the material for the stuff today just earlier and thinking to myself, well, wow, there's actually not a lot of straight material to go over tonight. I wonder how we're going to flesh out all of class. Like, we're going to have like an abbreviated class because there's not too much to talk about. And yeah, that did not happen. And it's actually been very fascinating. So, okay, so let's actually move on because it is getting late, and I still want to eat dinner at some point. I know. Well, we were talking. I lost my page. Sorry. Here it is. Okay. So, next I'm going to read the commentaries from the Von Danzig Fesch book here, and then we'll talk about it. So, here's what he says about the text and gloss of the Scheitelhau, the Scalp Stroke. Note, the scalper breaks the guard called Alber, or the Fool, and with its turn, it is a great threat to the face or chest. Okay, so he actually says face or chest as compared to the original that says, dangerous to the breast. So, anyway, that makes me feel more validated when I do it. But do it like this. When you come to him in the Zufechten, and he places himself in the guard of the Fool, then set your left foot forward and hold your sword on your right shoulder in the guard, and spring to him and strike with the long edge strongly from above down to his head. If he parries the stroke, so that both his point and one crossbar stand upwards, then this is called the Krong, or crown. Then remain high with your arms and raise your pommel with your left hand and drop your point over his hilt to his chest. If he goes up with the sword and pushes your point up with his hilt, then wind your sword under his crown through with the slice to his arms and press. Thus the crown is countered. by pressing, slice his arms hard and withdraw with the slice. So before we go on and talk about that, let's take a look. Let me hit this share. Oh, look at wrong part of my screen. Share screen. There's my video and share. Okay, so this should be lined up if I remember from what we were doing before. So here's that part at the very end of that text that we had just been talking about. So here's that first Scheitelhau. I'm striking with my long edge, my forward-facing edge, and Sarah here is defending with crown, but she's a little low. So I start off by turning, pause. So I start by, there it is. I wind my pommel with my left hand up high and drop my point into her face. So there's that. And then she sees that and rises up with the crown again. So I come underneath. I wind out and underneath her crown here, and then press the hands. So let's watch that in slow. She comes up to crown. I try to strike in, but she defends. So I try to wind to the face or breast, like the text says. She parries that, even a higher crown. So I come underneath. I press down on the wrists, and I was trying to be nice, but I could add the slice in a little bit there too, but I'm trying to not hurt her hands.
Because if you had said we were going to do hand stuff, I would have brought the stupid gloves.
Now, an interesting thing I wanted to say here is, so in this text, in this section of the text, he's talking about winding underneath and pressing on the hands, right? Well, if we're winding underneath his crown, why doesn't he say just to thrust? Well, that's because he already taught us that. If we go back to the section on the Zornhau, it talks about winding against your opponent, and if your opponent raises his sword to defend against your winding, you change through underneath and thrust. So the text doesn't repeat that here because he's already taught you that action. You wind, your opponent pushes their hands high, you just change through underneath. So that's another option here. In addition to pressing the hands, if your opponent goes high, you wind, you can just come underneath and press in with the point. That is a perfectly valid option here, and it's simply not taught in this section because he's already taught this to you. That was taught in a previous lesson. So we're not going to waste the ink and the time on a scribe to redo this part if we've already gone over it. So instead, he teaches us specifically. Yeah, instead it teaches us specifically here. Here's another option that you can do there. Go for the hands. So both of those are valid options. Mm-hmm.
Could you provide me the passage or the verse? Because I get lost in my own translation, and I don't know if it's the correct part. If you would be so kind.
For which for the one that we're talking about now with the Scheitelhau?
Because I don't find the English equivalent.
This is in English. This is the here begins the text and gloss of the Scheitelhau. This is the it has here begins the text and gloss of the Scheitelhau, and then it has the Liechtenauer's verse, just the scalper is a danger to the face, with its turn very dangerous to the breast. It has that part of the verse, followed by, it says, gloss, note the scalper breaks the guard called Alber, and with its turn it is a great threat to the face or chest. Do it like this. And then there's the paragraph of the step-by-step walkthrough.
And that's the commentary, right? So
yes.
Yeah.
Also, I don't. Wait. I found it. So the third is Albert and. Okay, I found it. All right.
Excellent, excellent.
Could you read it in German for us?
Which do you want to hear in German?
The
current version.
commentary, right?
Yeah.
If I'm right,
Okay, to be fair, we're American and you actually speak the real language. You're probably right.
We have the Scheitelhau, right, and a 4 goes. So, das ist die Text und die Gloss von. Wait, what's that symbol meaning? Wait, das ist die Text und die Gloss von einer Lea aus dem Scheitelhau. Schiel kurz, dich. Wait, there he is talking about the Waxel and Oxflug. Well, I'm afraid I have a different translation.
Okay.
Because I don't have the exact same part. That's troubling me. I want to read the correct part so I don't mess it up in your lesson.
If you're looking at, I have a slightly, I clicked the wrong link. This is gonna, if you look at this link, I'm gonna put it in the comments in the chat here.
Yeah.
So there is that link is the Scheitelhau, just as its own section. And if you scroll down in that and explode out the section that is labeled, sorry, wrong thing here. The pseudo Peter von Danzig gloss.
Okay. That was a misconception of mine. I screwed it up. I didn't know you can expand it. Okay.
Oh, gotcha. Yes. Yeah, it's a nice website in that regard. So this is one of them right here. Copy. I'm just copying some of the text over from that website.
Okay, I will try to read it for you.
Okay, excellent.
Den Scheitler, okay, I firstly must say I've talked so much English right now that I might mess up a little bit. Dem Scheitler, dem Antlitz ist Gefahr. Mit seiner Kehr der Brust fast Gefähr. Was ihm kümmt, dass die Kron das abnimmt. Schneid durch die Kron, so brichst du sie hart schon. So you break them hardly. Die Stiche Druck, mit Schnitten sie Abzug. Glossa, merk, dem Scheitler bricht die Hut, die da heißt Alba, und ist der zu dem Antlitz und der Brust mit seiner Kehr gar gefahrlich. Den treib also, wenn du mit dem Zufechten zu ihm kommst, legt er sich denn gegen dir in die Hut, Alba, so setz mit dem linken Fuß vor und halt mit deinem Schwert an deiner rechten Achsel in der Hut und spring zu ihm und hau mit der langen Schneide stark von oben nieder ihm zu dem Kopf. Versetzt er den Hau, das sei sein Ort, und dass sein Gehülz Peide über sich stehen, dass sein Ort, versetzt er den Hau, sodass sein Ort und dass ein Gehülz Peide überstehen, so heißt dasselbe Kron. So bleib hoch mit den Armen und heb mit der linken Hand dein Schwertskopf, dein Schwertsknopf, so the Pommel, Knopfpommel, über sich und senk in den Ort über sein Gehülz zur Brust. So lower the point above his parry or his hilt towards his breast. Fährt auf mit dem Schwert und stoßt dir den Ort mit dem Gehülz über sich, so wind dein Schwert wieder unter seine Kron mit dem Schnitt in seinen Arm und drück. Also ist die Kron wieder gebrochen. Und mit dem Drücken, so schneidest du ihm fast, it's really meant also quick, so fast, in die Arm und zieh mit dem Schnitt ab. Okay, I tried my best.
No, that was much better than any of us would have done. It's also great hearing it because English is a Germanic language, and a lot of people kind of forget that. And just hearing it out loud and understanding, I'm familiar with the English translation, and I could follow along with what you were saying in German simply because there were enough cognates, there were enough of the words are similar sounding enough. I could kind of catch the gist of what you were reading just by listening out loud. So comparing
Christopher, in future, I might have time and may join you on future lectures regarding that and try my best to help you. I'm also enjoying this because I love the exchange of knowledge in that matter.
And we're very appreciative of you coming along and helping out with this. It's fantastic. Thank you. So looking at the German and the English versions of that, how does that compare to what I showed with the video before? Rewind slowly and so right in the beginning of that section there, he says, if our breaks the guard, calls the Alber, we're coming into the Zufechten. We're just approaching range of each other. We're actually a little close for Zufechten here, but anyway, this, like I said, the video was just shot quickly. But my opponent's in Flug, which I need to rewind just a hair more to be in Flug again. But anyway, set your left foot forward and hold your sword on your right shoulder here in the guard, and spring to him, strike with the long edge strongly. Boom. So there's a strike with the long edge. If he parries the stroke and in the guard Krong, then remain high with your arms and raise your pommel with your left hand and drop the point over his hilt. So there is our winding action there. Raise the pommel up and drop the point over the hilt. If he goes up with the sword and pushes your point up with his hilt, then wind your sword under his crown through with the slice to his arms and press. Underneath, slice to the arms and press. Thus the crown is countered.
I have a little objection in that part, especially the winding part. Just an idea. If you're having the mention of and lift your sword's pommel over you, might it be that the Scheitelhau might be a little bit lower than expected? So you attack with the Scheitelhau, go a little bit more further. Yeah, okay, that part. So that might it be that the Scheitelhau might be even a little bit lower? So if you would cue the Scheitelhau lower and the opponent parries you higher, and you go up then into the blade itself and go into a winding and push the blade aside and then jump with the blade into the arms instead of having a upset, and so you lift the contact. Just an idea.
Well, I know I've seen discussion before with different folks regarding the height of the hands with the Scheitel, and that is one of those things that is a fairly regular discussion back and forth with different HEMA practitioners from different groups and things. The way we've done it within our group, part of the reason we keep our hands high is not just for, well, part of it is for the reach, because when the hands are higher like this, I'm able to get a little more of an extension in terms of how far I can reach out with the point. But also, if I reach out far while keep it with my hands being a little lower, I end up putting my hands in way of my sight. They're kind of in front of my face. So we've kind of used this where we push the hands up higher so that I can actually see my opponent underneath my sword. So I actually have a little better view there of what's going on.
The interesting part about what you mentioned brings me to an idea. Shield means actually like I can't do that. So and I don't know.
It's
well,
I
can't do it right now because it's not enough light for me. But I would love to attempt to demonstrate for you to do it.
And Kevin, I think part of this too is you're mixing up the verse again too, because this is the previous class was the shield, which is the squinter, and then this is Scheitel.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. I'm mixing.
No, you are not the first person to get those two confused. I've been doing this for 15 years, and every once in a while, I still get the shield and Scheitel confused and correct myself.
Even in the.
It's what they get for putting them back to back.
Okay, never mind. But
yeah,
that would be rather an aiming about. So if I get you correctly, it would be rather an aiming below the strike and not an aiming along the strike.
Yeah, if we're coming here, kind of like with my hands lower. If we're down here with the hands low, that's our Zornhau. That's our first play. And if I come here, if I were to just kind of put it a little higher, now I'm kind of blocking my own view. So the Scheitel is going to be much more here, so I can actually still see my opponent.
Yeah, I agree. It would be giving a little bit more protection that way, and you're not endangered hitting yourself with a pommel if you get a strike.
There is that too, yeah.
But I would be curious if there would be a different version of having a Scheitelhau below side, but maybe that's just playing mind, so that's all right.
Well, I'd say that you're sort of on the right basis there, but if you're going to do a lower Scheitel, then you're just doing a Zornhau.
Yeah, correct. Mm-hmm.
But of course, I think of all the different techniques, the Zorn and the Scheitel have a lot in common because you're ending in the same position, extended with the point in the center, the sword, not just the point, but the whole sword in the center. So, my Zorn is ending here, my Scheitel's ending here, but either way, I'm on this kind of line as compared to a Crump or a Zwerch or the Shield, where I'm kind of in a different position. These two are kind of in the same linear plane here. So a lot of the different techniques are going to be similar in terms of what to do to counter. So the winding actions, the Schwechselns, a lot of the plays that we can do from here are going to be very similar between the Scheitel and the Zorn, just by the nature of the position that you're ending in.
Depends also if you just perform a full-blown hew or if you just hew in the hanging.
Yeah.
Kevin, can I ask what hew means?
How? Just
Yeah, it's like a cut, or is it more percussive, or is it more of a like slicing manner?
so I know of the three wonders. So that
Okay.
is
The dry wonders.
pierce, strike, and cut. Right. So
Yeah.
Yes.
in German there would be stechen, schneiden, oder hauen. So basically, a hew is the same as this.
Like
if I perform this is a hew. A hew is an impact on this, so it's just that impact. A cut is is similar to this, and this appears. So a hew is just a impact hit.
I believe, Kevin, what Luke is really looking at too is in context what that term how and what that signifies to you as a native speaker, because that's one of those things that some people say cut for that in to translate it, but it's not really cut. So some
Cut
people
is
say
wrong.
hew. Yeah.
I would say cut
Yeah,
is wrong.
I see you laughing. I understand that. You're like, yeah, that means a lot more than just that.
I feel you. I feel you. So the confusion is just performing a cut and a hew, and yeah. So maybe I think they're pretty equivalent. A hew is just the performed action of reaching out with the sword towards the enemy. The actual impact you perform out of that, so either cutting or hewing, so that might be the confusion here. But regarding the manuscript, there is an appropriate mention of cutting if necessary. So I would go rather with a hew if they're instead of cut, but
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of using hew. Though what we do in a lot of the English is for the Schnitt we use the term slice.
Okay.
That's how we'll translate that to give a distinction between cut and slice. But what's interesting in terms of the translation of the word hew, in context in English, hew is not a martial art term, but hew is what you do when you're chopping firewood, or if you're talking about, I mean, I'm just saying not in the context of fighting manuals, but in terms of the use in the English language. If you were to say, I'm going to hew a tree, it means I'm going to fell a tree. So
Thanks, Sarah.
it's a very strong, blunted, powerful action that you're not. It's not a delicate. It's not a slicing. It's a so that's why I kind of like using hew sometimes when it comes to some of these cuts, because we're not talking about, if I'm throwing a Zornhau, I'm not slicing with like I'm using a fencing foil. It's a hewing action. You're cutting through
into your opponent's stride. You're
Yeah.
taking the center away from them.
I have one more addition to that. I've been studying the difference of a Kurzhau and a real Hau. The problem is, what I figured is that a real Hau is performed with an action with the whole arm. A Kurzhau instead is performed with an action within the changing of the wrist. So a Kurzhau would be a cut, what you assume, so a snap cut. That will be a Kurzhau, and a real Hau would be that. And Liechtenauer mentions before in his manuscript that you never should cut or hew weak, and maybe maybe you can replace all cuts really with hue, because this is also a way I train with my partners, if I have a partner regularly. So that happens from time to time. And if I train with such people, I always say, always fight with full force. And in addition, try to ruin my technique. Those 2 points are always important to me if I train, because if my technique is really working out, it should be working out even by resistance. And in addition, it should always work out by the proper force. So if I have an impact with a hard hue, then I have a contact with my bind, which is strong. If I have a Scheitelhau, then I have a bind which is weak, and therefore I can wind, and therefore, and etc. etc.
Cool. That's
Excellent. Yeah, that's a
interesting distinction.
Because we have this problem in German as well, and I always solve that with the mention of a so hue strong, hue weak, or if you're in the bind, be weak, be strong. And mostly that ends up in some things like, if I hue and I have my bind, in the moment of the bind, I can be strong, keep pushing, or be weak, budge. So depends always also on how I hue, and sometimes there is somewhere a mention also where Liechtenauer explains that all attacks regarding which are from below are always short, so kurz. So that might be also be such attacks, like if you're down in the elbow and you strike that way. So that will be a Scheitelhau. For you, a cut. And if you are performing a Oberhau, you might be calling that a hue.
This is great. I'm very much enjoying the conversations of looking at the subtleties of some of the language. This is some of these things that, again, when we have, well, especially once quarantines and all this are over and we're doing regular trainings, I find this stuff fascinating to be able to really dig into the finer notes of this stuff. But when we have a 90-minute class or something, we don't always have, you know, I want to spend minimal time talking and more time swinging.
Yeah, I know the
problem. Tonight is, all of these online classes have been fantastic, but tonight has also been really interesting, delving into some of the terminology, just because this is stuff that kind of runs through my head when I'm preparing curricula on a given week for class, but I only have so much time to really look at this stuff because there's so much other things going on. So, you know, of all the bad things going on in the world right now, at least this is productive.
Yes, yes. I can really support you in that way. It's been pretty lonely here in Germany as well during the current situations outside. And, well, it's pretty depressing thinking about some martial arts people in Italy, especially. I'm worried for those guys. There are some beautiful geniuses there, and I really hope there is someone above taking a watch on those guys. And nevertheless, going back to the mentioning of the problem having too much talk, I can feel you, really. And I must say, it's as important as fighting. A martial artist, especially in HEMA, is deeply connected with the past. And I find it very important to encourage that bonding. Yeah, well, because not forgetting the present, so doing the fighting as good as the past. There's a good example in Nuremberg. If you ever have the chance, Christopher, I greatly recommend you visiting the 3 clubs that are in Nuremberg. There are 3. One is Schwert und Bogen, which is a more very competitive orientated class or club who really encourage the fighting as perfection as good as possible. And there are two other clubs, one more or less enjoying more the fun, and they lack of proper equipment for protection. They wield steel swords, and they do a lot of foolish stuff. And there's a third club, which is not that deeply into the martial arts themselves in the practice of it, but more in the reproduction, in the proper in the proper understanding of what the technique is meant to be and to do. And all those three ambitions are valid and important. You need to be foolish and try things out without a great fear of hurting yourself, because that group has a very, very, very good um, conception and a very good handling with the sword, because they know how far they can go. They know that there's a real threat to someone who's not protected, and they really can be more quick and more efficient in the stuff they do, instead of just performing a technique. On the other hand, you have those guys from Schwert and Bogen, which are highly trained and very efficient, but it's very, very difficult because it's very structured. It's very limited. It's step by step. It has its reason, but there is no. It feels like you are not you are in a given set. You have no compression of free movement or independency. You have to do what's told to you. And that might be good for performing some techniques, but it overall might take a long time to be more flexible out of this. I dance ballet, for example. I'm also a ballet dancer, ballet, so not ballet. And I've been taught a very structured way that time, which greatly provided me the trouble of thinking freely. And you have to get the balance. And the third thing, which is important to HEMA, is the source. So you understand what's going on. Do you know how to speak the language? You know how to explain something, or well, just figure out in your mind just by telling you do a overhaul from the right and catch it with the blade or with the guard, and be weak at the sword, let it slide through and perform another overhaul from the other side. And everyone knows what's going on, and that's important. And for that goes that you have some time just rambling about and enjoy people having their mind just going across all the landscape just to once be free. And this is something I find very, very important in HEMA especially. That is what our martial arts is more about, I think, in my opinion, the free expression. We have the great, great advantage of being a young martial art compared to other, and like the Japanese or Asian martial arts communities, which are very strict. You have the problem there. There is no individuality, but that's because also of the Asian culture, and there's no problem with that. It's okay. And the thing is, we must have a healthy mix out of that for the European rambling in the mind, or the American in that case, and adding up the practice of the art in a proper way. And this goes with creativity.
I definitely agree with you on this. I think it's important to have balance. That when you have particularly someone like Luke, who had never performed martial arts before, just joined up because he thought it would be fun. There's a certain amount of training with him where I don't want him as his instructor doing whatever he wants complete, freedom to do whatever he wants, because I want him to learn to do things a certain way. I have, I have an extensive background in this, and this is how one should move, and I base that off my instructors who base it off their instructors. So there is some of that, lineage of instructor, of that solid base. But now that, in this case, Luke's been training for a few years with me and has a very solid core, solid foundation in the things that I've taught him. And now he's gotten to the point where he's not only competing, but he's taking some of the stuff that, he's cross-trained with some other instructors in similar but different schools. And he's kind of picking out, okay, well, these things work really well for me. And like Luke's case, he's fantastic at getting in close and grappling. So that isn't what I don't sit in every class and focus on teaching Luke just how to close distance and go to grapple. That's something that, I gave him a foundation, and now Luke's like, well, this is what works for me. So now he's taking his own freedom and his own experience from the thing that he's learned from me, that he's learned from Jason, that he's learned from Christian, and putting it all together.
I'm kind of sure it works for me. I'm not one of those ball fencers where Scheitelhau works for me. Scheitelhau generally does not work for me. It generally changes someone's guard, but it generally does not get me an actual cut in on them. So
yeah, you have a little less distance, a little less range than other people. So
yeah, exactly. Like, you are 6 foot, what? 6'4", 6'2"? I don't know.
I'm about 6'2".
Yeah, I'm like 5'8" tops.
What's other meters?
Yeah. I don't know what centimeters are, but I am shorter than Chris by a lot. So Scheitelhau for me against Chris does not work the same way as Scheitelhau for Chris works against me.
Chris is 73 centimeters, roughly.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
That's 1.87 meters.
I don't know.
Oh no, that's 6.1. That's not right. I don't know.
I know his reach is larger than mine. Where a Scheitelhau for me does not reach his head.
I went inches. It was 100.
If he's an over, he will hit my hands before I hit.
187.
I know that much.
I find it very interesting. Even Liechtenauer mentioned afore in his work, always fight with as various people you can fight with and therefore contribute in your experience. And this is one of the reasons, for example, I am more of a traveling martial artist in my view, because I visit clubs as much as I can everywhere I go. So, for example, I was in holiday somewhere and tried to find the martial arts club there. And what you learn is always valuable. And the problem, Lucas, you have is something many people have, especially women.
Thank you, Kevin.
Then there's Sarah, who's just about as tall as me.
There's the dictionary I have, the Kolben Kubler Gerhard. This is a German to medieval High German translation, which is very, very, very complex.
And now I have it bookmarked. Thank you.
I'm curious if you can navigate yourself through. Let me know.
But yeah. But yeah, before I forget too, Kevin, if you ever find yourself in the U.S., feel free to come by. I don't know how often you end up out this far, but
if I will consider a closer UK location by you, for sure.
Just for scale, the U.S. is a big place, but we're, what is it, maybe 2.5 hours from New York, 3 hours from New York, depending on traffic?
New York City.
Let's go with that.
Considering in these dire times, going near New York is rather not.
We're north.
We're north, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
stay out of the city for now, maybe, but yeah.
Yeah. Like 3 hours from the city. Let's go with that.
Okay. if I ever, I will definitely come by.
Definitely. So I know, yeah, this is great, but I eventually do have to. So let's just finish up this for tonight, and then we will. Let's see. Actually, it's 9:30. We've been going for about 2 hours now. I'm going to make the call now that I think that we'll take the Veer Lager section and the Veer Versetzen, and we'll focus on that next week. So at this point, we'll say, so for next week, we're going to look at, this is the text and gloss of the Veer Lager, and we'll continue on through, up through the Veer and Setzen. So in terms of, if anyone's using the, in St. George's name, this copy of the text, we're going to be working from pages 121 through 123 next week. And we'll look at that really, we'll look at some of that in depth and go over basically the idea of the 4 guards and then what master cuts defeat the 4 guards. And I know this is a little bit of stuff we've touched on before in previous classes, but we'll look at why some of those, why different cuts in particular work against different different guards. This is my timer too, by the way. My little earbud. When the battery starts to die on it, that means it's about time to wrap up for the night. But yeah, this was a fantastic discussion. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on with us tonight.
I'm happy to speak with a native speaker because that's completely different to my mono language knowledge.
I'm happy to be of contribution, and thanks for having me. It's not that commonly, and I stumbled across you on accident, and I think this has been very productive in my view as well. And
very happy accident.
A happy accident, yeah, indeed. And I may add 2 more things to leave you off in regard of the Huten, and especially the Alber and the Fontag. And you might know the Fontag. I don't know what's the proper translation to you guys in English. Do you use it as this term?
We use it. We just say Vamtag because, from my understanding of it, is in more modern German translation, it's from the day, but in earlier texts, from what I've read, it's more meant from the roof, and I'm not sure.
So
I'm not sure where that transition happened.
I also go with the translation from the day because from Tag might be from the roof. There is a mentioning of a Dachhau, which is a roof how indeed, and I'm not sure that might be something special, and I'm not quite sure. I might be wrong on this, but from Tag means from the day. So I rather explain it in German from the morgen. So from the dawn. So it comes right at you. So
Interesting.
That's something I use it for. And the Alber, on the other hand, and by the way, it's vom Tag. How can you repeat it again? How did you say
in my terrible German?
It might be a terrible German, but
more like a fawn, like a fawn tog.
Vom-Tag.
Vom-Tag.
So it's less of,
yeah. That's better.
English V, like in more of an F.
Excuse me, Lucas, I didn't understand you.
I'm attempting. Sorry, it's more of a fawn tog instead of a fawn tog.
Vom-Tag, yeah, with a capital M.
They tend to use N.
Okay.
Yeah, the accent is more on the first part, vom.
Yeah, it's just I'm like I said, I speak the one language and I speak the second language really, really poorly. So I apologize.
Okay, you just wrote that vom Tag in chat, just for anybody that doesn't see the chat when they're watching the video later on. Vom Tag equals von dem Tag, which that makes sense.
Not fun.
Von dem Tag.
Von dem Tag.
Von dem Tag. Okay. That's different than I'm used to, but like I like it because it's probably better.
So it's vom Tag or von. So it's two. But that's something you can enjoy later on. And I have a second thing I might add: the Alber.
Yes.
This is something I really enjoy showing new guys in the German way, just like this. So I'll show it to you. You might have your blade, putting it downwards, and the Alber has a pretty simple way to be introduced. So what do you do if an enemy comes closer to you? So for example, you approach me, I just do this. By pointing up the blade at your chin, as you walk at me, I just say, "Du bist albern. You're ridiculous." So you're a fool. That's it. So the Fool's Guard is a pretty good translation, but a fool is in German a Narr, and being foolish is being albern. So the Alber is pretty much a fool. So that's something I want to add up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Excellent. Well, thanks everybody for participating tonight, and again, thanks Kevin for joining us.
Yeah.
This was fantastic.
I know you must be
like
tired at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm tired, and I'm not even in your time zone.
Yeah.
So
it's just 4 a.m. I don't know what you're having.
Okay. Well, thanks again, everybody. Next week we're going to focus on the beer lager and continue on starting looking at some of the what to do once we are in range with our opponent. So tune in next week, 7 o'clock Eastern time, and I'll send out the link for the meetings. If it'll be on Facebook, if you're not on Facebook, just like Kevin did, send me an email, and I can send you a link to our meetings, and the more the merrier. So thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night. Or good morning.
Good morning. Yes.
Good morning.